As you said, the camera is the most powerful weapon that's ever been invented. The camera is changing the world, and you just have to focus that camera. I think David's focusing his camera, as other photographers are too, and focusing it on the need to educate people as to the reality of the world that we live in and the threats that we face and the solutions that we can come up with. And you know, it's the best form of communication there is. You know, you might notice that over the years how media evolved, and it took us by surprise. And the Vietnam War, for example, was the first war that ever went on television. And the Pentagon learned a lesson. They're not going to do that again, because that war on television ended the war. Suddenly, we were in the war. We're not in some place over in Iraq or Afghanistan where we don't even know what's going on, and we never see any images, and they're not even allowed to see the bodies coming home.
Right.
Vietnam War on TV was a completely different reality together because they hadn't got around to censoring it. We live in a very censored society right now. If the war of what was going on in Afghanistan and Iraq were right now portrayed the same way it was during the 60s and 70s, it would have been over 5 years ago. Now it's the endless war, and will just continue to go on because there's money to be made and people to exploit. But they're also destroying the environment in the process. And there's so many things that we need to address in society, from war and disease and starvation and environmental degradation, and all of these things can be solved only through a diversified movement and with diversified imagination and talent, and to educate people as to what this world is really all about. Because I don't know if you saw, you all probably saw the movie The Matrix. Well, we're living in the Matrix, except that the media has invented that reality for us. So we live in the reality invented by a media that's owned by people like Murdoch and all these other people who control that information flow and what we see.
Designed by us, because the creative industry actually, we design it. We create this matrix. I mean,
and we got to take it back.
Yeah.
Got to take it back from these people.
Yeah. I mean, this is what you're doing. You made stars. You made people big.
And nobody controls David, right? David
it's a good thing.
Does what he wants, and that's good.
What did you think when you saw the gas station pieces, the artworks?
Actually, my first impression when I saw the gas station, I don't know if you're showing it right here, is
the BP, right?
I think it was the other one, but the first thing I noticed was the formations were double Ys, which is like super male, and I think it illustrated the, this.
That one.
Yeah, this one out here. So instead of a XY or XX, it was it was double Y, and which means male aggression out of control, and that was the first thing that hit me about it. But in fact, this funny thing is, I saw a BP station in New York last night that looks just like that one, without all the other stuff. And the first image came to me because it was right on the river there, and I said, "Oh, geez, that's the station, in 100 years." But yes, and look what we have right now. This government that we have in the United States is controlled by this company. We saw that in action in the Gulf. We had crews down in the Gulf trying to save wildlife. We were told by the United States government we could not save wildlife without the permission of BP. And then BP wanted to sign, we had to sign releases saying that we wouldn't divulge any information about this. And I got on the Larry King show and said they were burning the carcasses of dolphins and whales at night in the Gulf. And nobody had heard that before, but because I was on that live show, I was able to get it across. And suddenly it was a major scandal. But this is what these guys get away with. They control the people who they give the money to get elected, and then they, they're in control. They're the real terrorists, and but they're focusing more on other issues. Like, for instance, example, just quickly on, you all heard about piracy in Senegal. I mean, in Somalia.
Yes.
Why are there pirates in Somalia? I think Captain Phillips the movie actually got into it, which I was glad that they did. There are pirates in Somalia because the real pirates went into the Somali waters and destroyed everything, took out all the fish and dumped their garbage into those waters and drove those people into poverty, giving them no alternative but piracy. And that is what's going to happen in Mauritania, Senegal, and Liberia, and Guinea-Bissau in the next few years. That's why our ships are in there now. working with those governments to try and get those foreign fleets out of there. And just last week we arrested a Russian trawler that was just offshore and get them in, and Putin's screaming about how, you know, it's piracy. When a government seizes a boat for illegal fishing, it's now called piracy by a superpower. So this is what we're trying to avoid, is the same kind of poverty that drives people into these acts of desperation and turns them into ecological refugees.
One good thing about fossil oil, the whales. There's no fuel anymore made with whales, right?
Is what?
You said that in the studio in LA. You said there's one good thing about fossil oil.
Well, no, I think that was out of context.
Okay.
There's two things that ended whaling back in the 1800s. One was the Civil War, because the Confederates destroyed the Yankee whaling fleet, which was the only good thing they did. But also was Rockefeller refining oil, which took the burden off of the whales on that.
They were burning whale oil.
Yeah, they were all burning whale oil. In fact, the revelation that came to me as to why I do what I do happened in 1975. When we were out with Greenpeace to stop the Soviet whaling fleet in the North Pacific. And we came up with this incredible idea at the time that, oh, well, we just have to put our bodies between the whales and the whalers, and that'll end whaling. I mean, you know, the Gandhi approach. We were reading a lot of Gandhi at the time and figured this is going to work. So in June of '75, Robert Hunter and I found ourselves in a small little inflatable boat in front of a Soviet whaling fleet vessel that was bearing down on us at full speed. And in front of us, fleeing for their lives, were 8 magnificent sperm whales. And every time the harpooner tried to get a shot, I would maneuver the boat and block his aim. And this worked for about 20 minutes until the captain on the Soviet vessel came down the catwalk, and he screamed into the harpooner's ear. Then he looked at us, smiled, and brought his finger across his throat, and that's when I realized Gandhi wasn't going to save the day that day. And a few minutes later, there was this incredible explosion, and the harpoon flew over our heads and slammed into the backside of one of the whales. It was a female whale, and she screamed. She screamed like a woman in pain. That's what it sounded like. And she rolled on her side in a fountain of blood, and suddenly the largest whale in that pod rose up out of the water, slapped the water with his tail, and disappeared. And we knew what he was doing. He was turning to attack us, and rightfully so, to protect his pod. But he swam right underneath of our little boat and threw himself straight in the air towards the harpooner on the Soviet vessel. But they were waiting for him with an unattached harpoon. Harpooner pulled the trigger, another explosion. Point blank, hit him in the head, and he fell back in the water, rolling, blood everywhere. And I suddenly caught his eye. And he looked at me, and then I saw something that changed my life forever, because he dove, and I saw this trail of bloody bubbles coming towards us. And he came up and out of the water at an angle, so that the next move was to fall down on top of us and crush us. And as his head rose up out of the water, and I looked into his eye, and it was right there, just a few feet away from me. I could even see my own reflection in his eye. And what I saw there, that's what changed my life, because I saw understanding. He understood what we were trying to do, was to protect him. But I also saw something else, and it was pity. And not for himself or his kind, but for us. Why were we doing that? It was an abomination. We were killing this beautiful, intelligent, majestic, incredible creature for its oil. And what were we using the oil for? There was no real use for spermaceti oil except for heavy lubricating oil for industrial machinery. And the Russians were using it to manufacture intercontinental ballistic missiles. Here we were, destroying this beautiful, intelligent life form for the purpose of making a weapon meant for the mass extermination of human beings. And that's when it struck me, we're insane. Our whole damn species is insane. And from that moment, I said to myself, I'm not doing this for people. For the rest of my life, I'm doing it for them. For the whales, for the sharks, you know, for the fish of the sea. That's why I do what I do, and that's why I don't really care about criticism. So when people say, you know, I disagree with what you're doing, I say, yeah, well, find me a whale that disagrees with it, and maybe I might reconsider. But until then, this is what we're going to do. But at the same time, we do what we do with responsibility. In 1986, I had a Tibetan Buddhist monk come to my ship, and he gave me a little statue, and he said, I've been asked to give this to you. Can you put it up in your mast? Didn't know what it was, but he didn't give an explanation. But you know, when a Tibetan Buddhist monk comes all that way and gives you a little thing, oh, why not? So I put it up there. And it was only, that was in '86. In '89, I had the opportunity, the great privilege to sit and talk with the Dalai Lama. And I showed him a picture of it. I said, what is this? He says, I sent that to you. I said, well, what is it? He says, it's the symbol of, it's called Hayagriva. It's a symbol, and I said, what's that? And he said, it's a symbol of the compassionate wrath of the Buddha. I said, well, what's that mean? He says, well, you never want to hurt anybody, but sometimes when they cannot see enlightenment, scare the hell out of them until they do. And that's why we have the Jolly Roger flag. We have never injured a single person in our history in 35 years of operations, but we intimidate the hell out of them. So much so that they call us eco-terrorists and pirates and anything, but they can call us whatever they want, as long as we can stop them from doing their killing and their destruction, because we are guided by a respect for life. And so whatever their perception is irrelevant. It's the results that count. And just last year, they only got 10% of their kill quota in the Antarctica, and we're doing even better this year. But we have to be aggressive.
And what can we do? What products can we avoid? What can we do? You know, living in cities, whether New York, LA, or whatever. You know, what can this room in here? Like, what are the steps that we can take? What, you know, I mean, the Reverend Billy talked about so many things. You know, raise your consciousness, voting with your dollars. What can we avoid buying and stuff? And before you answer that question, I just want, you know, getting rid of this age of decadence. When I was in Maui, when I was making these images, I would live on one side of Maui, and 3 hours away is sort of the civilization part. So I went there, and I went to a Costco for the first time, and I saw this big giant bag of perfectly formed, you know, and when you organic farm, you start knowing the difference between, the obvious difference between organic fruit and not. So there are these perfectly formed watermelons, like soccer balls, that came all the way from Argentina, and they were in a plastic net that, like, kids' toys come in and stuff. It's a huge thing. And it was $4.99, and so, you know, petrochemicals were used to fertilize them, for the pesticides, and then they had to be shipped from Argentina to the most fertile island, you know, in the planet, Maui, where everything grows, and it was $4.99. So, you know, Louis XVI used the pineapple when people would come to visit him. He'd offer a pineapple, you know, dignitaries or whatever, and it was like, oh, this exotic thing that flew thousands of miles. Now we go to Costco, we don't think twice that, you know, we're getting fruit from all the way across the world, but that's in itself one of the most decadent things. I mean, the pineapple was a symbol of decadence and an offering, you know, of like, I am so rich and I can give you this thing like a mountain of caviar or something, you know. And now we just take it for granted. We actually think we're being thrifty by shopping at Costco because we can get, you know, we're not spending a lot of money and stuff. But we're in such a decadent age that we don't even realize how that even these seeming benign purchases, you know, to someone who doesn't know is so incredibly decadent, and the bill's going to come due. So, what is it that we can do to help you, to help Sea Shepherd? In our daily lives, what choices can we make? You know, what's the number one thing or list of things that you could give us, or is there any that you can tell us? You know?
I don't think you can say there's a number one thing, because one of the one thing we have to accept is that we were born hypocrites, and we've lived our life as hypocrites,
right.
And we were never given any choice about that. We have to do these certain things because it's ingrained within the society that we're in. What we eat, what we drive, what, you know, flying on airplanes, all this
right.
stuff, it's all there. And but what you can do is voluntarily lessen your your hypocrisy. When you were saying people should become vegan, our ships are all vegan vessels, and you be vegan, vegetarian, or at least lessen your consumption of that, you know. Because not many people realize that it extends just beyond ethics, that 40% of everything taken out of the ocean is fed to other animals. Pigs, chickens, fish, and salmon-raised fish. To raise one salmon in a salmon farm requires taking 75 fish out of the ocean to feed it. We now live in a world where pigs eat more fish than all the world's sharks put together, where chickens are eating more fish than all the world's albatrosses.
And 50 million chickens a day are killed for cat food.
And the other thing, in addition to the chickens killed for cat food, is that domestic house cats are now eating more fish than all the world's seals put together.
Oh, God.
So just that one thing alone, stop feeding fish to cats. It's not a natural prey. If a cat ever ran into a yellowfin tuna, the tuna would eat the cat. So it's not very natural. And but in fact, cats don't really like fish, but, you know, we sort of say, well, it's protein, they'll eat it. But these are the things all these little things add up. And but but each and every one of them by themselves is an innocent thing. I mean, you want to live in a house and it requires materials, that's
Right.
quite innocent. If you want to, if a couple want to have a child, that's quite innocent.
Right.
What isn't innocent is multiplying that by 7 billion, which now becomes, when the year I was born, there were 3 billion, now there's 7.5 billion, you know, it becomes 14 billion. Where does this end?
Right.
You know, so we have to come up with some sort of way of voluntarily limiting that population. But as soon as you even go in that direction, now all of a sudden you're
People
a Nazi,
right.
whatever like this. You can't even
Right.
talk about it. In 1972, I attended the United Nations World Conference on the Environment in Stockholm.
Mm-hmm.
The #1 issue on the agenda was out of control human population
Right.
growth. 20 years later, I attended the UN conference in Rio de Janeiro. It wasn't on the agenda. It had
Right.
vanished. And in that time, 1.5 billion people have been added to the planet,
Right.
because now it's something that you don't talk about.
Right.
And I remember, you know, when I was on the Sierra Club, we brought this up, and all of a sudden now I'm a racist. I get a call from the San Francisco Chronicle. What do you got against Mexicans? I said, nothing. I don't give a damn if California is 100% Mexican. You know, I kind of like Mexican food anyway. So, but, you know, all of a sudden they immediately translate any talk of population
Right.
control into racism.
Right.
And it has nothing to do with it at all.
Right.
And, you know, I don't,
And no
I don't
politician
discriminate
will
on
touch
that.
it.
No, the
They'll never
politicians
talk
are
about
scared to death.
Yeah.
I mean, I've even coined a word for politicians with their relationship with fishermen. I call it homopeshophobia, fear of fishermen. Every politician on the planet is deathly afraid of a fisherman, because, you know, it's like that right out of the Bible sort of occupation, and you don't mess with those guys as they're destroying the planet. And the problem is the fishermen are destroying the planet. And I say that because I was raised in a fishing village in eastern Canada, and you know, everybody says, oh, it's like a salt of the earth occupation. No, it isn't. They throw everything overboard, and they take everything they can get, and they shoot at every bird that's in competition with them.
Even when you were a kid?
Yeah, well, especially when I was a kid. I mean, you could always tell the poor kids in my community. We went to school with the lobster sandwiches on a homemade bread, desperately trying to trade them for bologna on Wonder, which we thought was exotic. So we were real fishing community there. But
so lessen
the attitude
or
I found,
eliminate eating fish and being vegan. And
well, first thing I would think people should eliminate eating fish, because that's the root of it all. And
even sardines.
There's no animal on
sardine
land.
Populations are crashing, even the small sardines.
There's no animal on land that we treat the way we treat the creatures in the ocean.
Mm-hmm.
2 days ago, they rounded up 250 dolphins in Taiji, Japan. Included amongst that is a baby albino, which they now is immediately seized upon, because that's worth about $500,000. And every year in Taiji, Japan, they round up between 1,500 and 2,000 dolphins, sell the best specimens to the aquarium trade, slaughter the rest. And,
For what?
It's not healthy to eat dolphin meat, right?
It's full of mercury, but that doesn't matter. You know,
They eat the dolphin.
Yeah, well, they market it in Japan, but what's driving it is the real money, which is capturing these dolphins for the aquarium trade. Anybody who goes to a marine aquarium like SeaWorld or whatever is contributing to the enslavement and destruction of the dolphins of the world and the orcas of the world. And you know, they're not here for our entertainment. They're not here. I mean, you take one of the most incredibly intelligent creatures on the planet and lock them up, and then they say Tilikum killed 3 of its trainers. God, I'm surprised they hadn't killed them all.
Right.
You know,
and
you
in the
don't
wild,
walk through
the killer whale's never actually been a reported case in the history
Yeah.
of the world of an orca, which they term killer whale, but it's never killed a human being in the wild ever. But they call them killer whales to bring in people, and it's just misinformation they're giving us. So they're not people. They're like, ooh, it's this thing that's going to kill somebody. So they build up on that fear. When the animal doesn't hurt people in the wild.
I've been in the water with the wild orcas, and I don't know of any creature that big, that powerful, with that kind of a reputation, allow you to go up and pet it in the wild. We're not talking about in the and no orca.
Blackfish is a great film too.
And no orca has ever attacked a human being. But here's the other thing: Blackfish didn't get nominated for the Academy Award. The most powerful film that's been released this year did not get a. And why? Because SeaWorld, pressed the right buttons. They weren't going to let it get there because they knew that if it got to the Academy Awards, that was going to be the end of SeaWorld, which hopefully there will be the end coming soon for SeaWorld because their stock is plummeting like that. And that they call themselves an educational facility, but when you go there, all you learn is that they jump through hoops, which they don't do in that, but they never talk about the real things that are happening to our ocean. SeaWorld's an abomination.
Mm-hmm.
When did you become an activist, Paul?
Oh, when did I become an activist?
Mm-hmm.
When I was 10 years old, I was swim in Eastern Canada. I spent my summer swimming with a family of beavers, and I'd go every day and swim with them, and I had a great time. And then the next year I went back and I couldn't find them anywhere, and started to ask questions. Found out trappers had taken them all the winter before. And I became pretty angry. So that next winter I began to walk the trap lines and release the animals from the traps and destroy the traps. So I started as I guess a eco-saboteur at 11. And that. It was interesting. And Dixie Lee Ray, the governor of Washington, she said in her book Trashing the Planet, which is basically attacking environmentalists, she said, evidence of Watson's insanity can be found that when he was 12, he shot a boy in the ass who was about to shoot a bird. Any boy who would shoot another boy to protect a bird has to be insane. I said, well, Dixie, in my town, every kid shot every other kid with a BB gun. I just happen to have a practical reason to shoot the kid that I did.
That's great.